Hey. Hi, everybody. We are just going to wait a little bit longer. We have a lot of people joining us today. So just give us a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, can everyone hear me? Nod if you can hear me. Yeah, all right, good stuff. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Ariana Hones. You've probably gotten some emails from me. I'm the Southeast organizer with Wisconsin Conservation Voters. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to have you all. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the Clean Energy Toolkit and how to start organizing around clean energy in your own communities. So first, just wanted to put in a quick note that Conservation Voters is putting on this conversation today, but the toolkit was put on and created with Sierra Club of Wisconsin and also with Renew Wisconsin. So they're our partners in this as well, and we were so happy to have them in that partnership. So thank you to them as well. So just a couple of quick things. We are going to probably be talking for about an hour and a half. We're going to start off with just going over an overview of the toolkit. And then we're going to be talking about some organizing strategies for that. And so if you have questions throughout, you can just type them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be making a note of them. And we're going to just take all the questions at the end. Also, everyone should be muted, but if you can just keep muting yourself throughout, sometimes there's a little bit of back noise and that kind of thing. So just keep muting yourself until the end when you have questions. We'd love to hear them. And then I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves that is going to be presenting as we go throughout the thing. So you're going to hear from a lot of our team, but we'll skip those introductions until they start sharing their pieces. So yeah, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and otherwise we'll get started. So we're going to start off with Jen. She is our Government Affairs Director at Conservation Voters. She is instrumental in the creation of the toolkit, so we're going to be hearing from her first. So yeah, Jen, if you want to just introduce yourself and then start taking it away.
Sure. Thanks. So I'm Jennifer Gietrich. I'm the Government Affairs Director, as Ariana said. And I just want to take a second to say that Heather Allen at Renew and Elizabeth Ward at Sierra Club and I all wrote this toolkit together. So I really want to give a huge shout out to them on that. I'm going to walk through a little bit of the overview of the lay of the land here in Wisconsin and kind of our history. And then we'll walk through some of the pieces of the toolkit. I'm just going to do very broad strokes, but there is a lot of very technical details in this report and a lot of links to other things. So if I'm not going into anything in the right amount of detail, it is most likely in this report. So let me share my screen here. Is that working?
Yes, looks good, Jen.
Okay. Then let's get started. So one of the things I want to start out by saying is that in 2009, Wisconsin was really at the peak of being a clean energy leader, not just in the Midwest, but in the entire country. We had just passed one of the strongest renewable energy portfolio standards in we were going to get 10% of our renewable energy by 2015. Then Governor Doyle had just created a huge task force to look at how we were going to adopt clean energy and climate change programs and policies throughout all levels of government and do it particularly in a way to create clean energy jobs. And we were in this really great spot. But then the 2010 elections came, and literally Wisconsin kind of stayed frozen in time for the last, for the 8 years following that. Governor Walker came in and kind of dismantled a lot of the state energy programs. We hit our state RPS, we had that 10% goal. We hit it in 2013 and literally never increased it. Despite the fact that states like Minnesota continued to innovate and come up with stronger goals. The state of Minnesota right now literally has a goal for 25% renewable energy across the state by 2025. but their main utility, Xcel Energy, is getting 31.5% of its energy from renewable sources. And they hit that in 2020. But Wisconsin was kind of locked in to where we were, and we really didn't move forward. Unfortunately, local governments also kind of got stuck around that 2010 era. So this map right here shows you in 2008 and 9, a whole set of communities were making a energy independent community pledge across the state. We had about 140 communities do it. And the goal at that time was to get 25% of their energy from renewable energy sources by 2025. It was an aspirational goal, but as soon as Governor Walker came in and kind of did away with a lot of the state programs, a lot of these communities never moved forward. In fact, almost none of them did. So this was the potential we had, and unfortunately, it kind of went away. Now, the good news is elections have consequences, and so we have seen recently some movement on clean energy again. So Governor Evers and Lieutenant Governor Barnes were elected. They had a huge commitment towards climate change, but also to helping move the state of Wisconsin forward again. And a lot of that is also working to make sure that local governments have the resources they need. So in 2019, Governor Evers created the Office of Energy or Office of Sustainability and Energy Independence. And part of that is commitments to local resources for local governments to do energy planning, which is great. And then he also created a task force on climate change, which is meeting right now. And then also had an executive order to have Wisconsin getting all of its electricity from carbon-free sources by 2050. So it was a huge move forward. But the reality is our state legislature is still pretty locked in on kind of a fossil fuel, an old school reliability understanding of energy. And so while the governor is moving forward in ways that he can, if we're actually going to make progress, it's going to happen at the local level. And so this is part of what we're here to talk about today. After President Trump was elected and announced that he was pulling the United States out of the Paris Accords, local governments across the country, but here in Wisconsin, really started making a huge commitment to serious, enforceable clean energy plans. And so as of right now, we have 10 communities in Wisconsin who have some sort of 100% clean energy by 2050 goal, which is really exciting. But we got to continue making that progress because the local governments are what is going to make sure that our legislature and our governors into the future have a strong commitment to clean energy. And that's why we created this toolkit. So this is what it looks like. It's online, so we'll make sure you have the link to that, but we also have paper copies for people who need that. There's a lot of great resources in here. So I'm just going to walk through right now for this conversation some of the base level information that you're probably going to want to know to be able to start formulating your plan. So the first thing you need to know is what kind of utility is in your area or your government uses. So there's 3 types of utilities in Wisconsin. There's investor owned. So those are the utilities they're privately owned, they're financed by shareholder equity, and they can also take out debt. But they're regulated by the Public Service Commission. So that's a state agency. It has 3 appointed commissioners. Right now, 2 are appointed by Governor Evers and 1 by Governor Walker. And they make sure that there is a balance between fair prices for ratepayers, but then also that the utilities are able to make their money back. So there's a lot of structure in place if you have an investor-owned utility. The second type is municipally owned utilities. So there's about 70 of those across our state, And those utilities are governed either by local elected officials, like city council members, or other commissioners, but they are locally based. You should know who they are in your community, and they make their own decisions. So it's very similar to if you had a city council campaign, your municipally owned utility is very local and should be able to make decisions for the utility. And then the third kind is electric cooperatives. So these are private, they're member owned, and they elect the leaders who make the decisions for the utility. In Wisconsin, probably the one you're most familiar with is Dairyland Power in the western side of the state. But so 3 different kinds of utilities with different decision making, but then also different access to funding. Then besides the kind of utility you have, you also are going to want to know what are their current commitments for clean energy, because this will really help play into your plan. And again, this information is in your toolkit with some ability to look it up. But different utilities have different commitments to clean energy. So that means what is their portfolio, how much of it is fossil fuels, how much of it is committed to solar or to wind. Different utilities have that. And because in Wisconsin, some of our utilities are in Wisconsin and some parts of it are in other states, they have different levels of commitment towards clean energy and how much of it is actually physically located in Wisconsin versus it may be located in Minnesota and they're able to get it to Wisconsin so it can count. The other piece that is kind of new in recent years is that different utilities kind of responding to the fact that voters and consumers want to see strong climate plans have begun putting together their own carbon reduction plans. And it looks different in different utilities, but those are the plans, how much carbon they are committing to reducing and how they are planning to do that, that can really play into your local plans. So knowing what kind of commitment they made will be really helpful for you in figuring out where you have some opportunities. So the next big kind of thing you need to figure out is your own local government and where you're at. So the first piece is figuring out what level of government you're going to target. So the great news about energy and clean energy campaigns and commitments is that we're seeing city councils, we're seeing school boards, we're seeing tribal governments, we're seeing collections of governments come together and figure out how they can do more clean energy investment. So whatever level of government you have the best relationship with decision makers or more friendly kind of already vibe to it, that's probably the best place to start. But what level of government will also depend on what kind of decisions they can make and what kind of resources they have available to them. So being really clear about that's important. And then the next piece of it is that once you figure out your level of government, there's different kinds of commitments that governments can make. So they can make pledges or kind of aspirational goals. We've seen that in certain communities. They can also do binding resolutions. So that's where the entity passes a commitment that they are holding themselves accountable to, no matter who is in office. We've seen models with task forces where people are appointed and they come together with plans, and they can be community leaders or members as well as local elected officials. And then there's even some unique things. So like the Oneida tribe made a energy optimization model where they are looking to develop a comprehensive energy plan that is focusing on investments, like where are they putting their money and making sure that it is in clean energy and renewable energy development. So there's all kinds of ways that you can do it. And then finally within that, there's also all kinds of different kinds of clean energy you can do. So it can be the energy use, like is your community relying on fossil fuels like coal or natural gas, or are you investing in wind and solar? Transportation has a lot of decisions that you can make about investing in clean fuels or getting electric vehicle charging stations in your area, or more bike paths. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's also some communities have looked at ways that they can partner with nonprofits to make sure that people are able to access energy efficiency and conservation programs. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can imagine what a clean energy plan or commitment looks like. A major piece of this toolkit was actually to help local governments figure out, excuse me, to figure out funding, because that is often a big barrier to being able to do big changes. And so a very big part of this toolkit is looking at different levels of funding and sources of funding, both conceptually, but then also a good list of resources. But I just generally wanted to talk about some of the differences. So first of all, there's different types of funding. So it could be that your community wants to invest in a big solar project. So that would be an example of a specific project that you are looking for funding for. How do we actually build this solar project? And there's all kinds of projects that you could be seeking funding for within that. The second kind of major area is technical assistance and planning. So for a lot of local governments, there is not staff who are dedicated to figuring out a system-wide energy use, or may not have the technical assistance to do setting a baseline for energy use right now, and how you develop a plan that actually creates enforceable benchmarks, you know, as you go out to 2050, and how you really build for that. So there are a lot of great resources for that. Probably the biggest one in the state of Wisconsin is the Office of Energy Innovation. So this is the thing that we had a decade ago that's kind of coming back with a real life to it. These are people who work with their state employees, but they work with local governments to actually do a lot of the technical evaluation of their energy systems. There's also some nonprofits or business models that governments can hire to actually do that work for them, kind of as consultants. So those are kind of the two major areas or types of funding that governments need. And then within that, there's all different kinds of sources of funding. And I think one of the coolest things about putting together this toolkit is seeing all the case studies from around the state of different ways that different communities looked at who was in their community and looked at what they wanted to do and built some really interesting partnerships. So public-private partnerships, you know, the most common one is a city, you know, partnering with their utility to, you know, build like a solar array, or in some cases working with other businesses to create employee models that they can work together. But the point is that you're looking at really kind of using the power of that private-public partnership to make things real. The second source of funding is government, and this can kind of happen in a couple ways. One, the state of Wisconsin and the federal government have a lot of different kinds of dedicated pots of funding. In Wisconsin, one of the most exciting ones for us is the Board of Commissioners for Public Lands has a loan program for local governments that will allow them to get low interest loans to do renewable energy and clean energy projects. So that's an example of a government actually making a loan to the community. There's all kinds of federal programs to actually do evaluations or fund certain like low income efficiency and conservation projects. Tribal governments have a whole set of unique federal partners or programs that they can take advantage of that are in this book. But the other thing that government can do is they can also bond their own, kind of create their own funding mechanism through green bonds. So there's a whole section on that of being able to invest in projects on their own and borrow for that. And then finally, one of the coolest ways that folks can think about funding local project is through kind of generally what's called infrastructure buyback. So certain programs where you would buy a solar array up front, or maybe invest in energy efficiency or conservation measures, like an energy efficient heating system for the local community center. The little bit of savings that the government would save on their electric bill can then go to pay off the initial infrastructure of that. And usually once that, it takes a while to do it, you're usually doing programs in which you know what the payback will generally be based on your past energy use. And then once that is paid off through that energy savings, the local government gets to keep all that additional money going forward and either reinvest that into another clean energy project, or can put it towards any other energy or any other need that the community has. The cool thing about it is that it gives local government certainty in that their bills generally are fixed. They don't have to guess what they're going to be, and usually they are very they're very mindful about setting it up so it works. But then once that infrastructure is paid off, not only do they have cleaner energy or more efficient energy in the community, but they're actually able to take that fixed regular cost of energy and reduce it quite a bit going forward. So it's a win-win all around. And there's a lot of exciting different kinds of programs for that that are in the toolkit. There's a lot of examples of various programs in there, and I'm not going to go through all those because that's pretty common. But the one thing I really did want to make sure we talk about finally is that there's a good section in here on making sure that as we are thinking about developing clean energy plans in our communities, that as advocates, we're thinking about doing it in equitable ways. If we're going to be thinking big picture and thinking new ways of doing things, I think this part is really important. Milwaukee City and County right now has a really good model for thinking about this. But the toolkit also has some examples, like NAACP has put together some really great, really substantive energy action toolkits that are good. City of Cleveland has also looked at all this. But the main kind of ideas that you want to be thinking about as advocates are making sure that we are not recreating the existing problems that our energy system has, but that we're also not creating unintended consequences. So kind of the main principles here is maintaining or improving the affordability of energy for lower income houses. So sometimes investments in clean energy may pay for themselves eventually, or pay for themselves if you look at the fuller cost of reduced healthcare costs or other things like that. But we also have to be thinking about, for individual families, that we are not that we are thinking about how those monthly bills may be affected. Not all sources of energy will do that, but we need to think about that for sure. Secondly, the reality of our current energy system is that we have pollution hotspots in our communities, and they can sometimes be purposely cited in communities of color and or communities that have lower income populations. So as we are thinking about making transitions, looking at where the coal-fired power plant is located, looking at where diesel bus main routes are located, and making sure that we are dealing with those places first. And so that we are addressing the historical nature of that, but then making sure that we are also creating new opportunities, that we're not just shutting down dirty things, but we are reinvesting in clean energy sources in those same neighborhoods and communities. And then finally, making sure that as we're creating new investments, that we are thinking about making sure that people who have historically been disadvantaged when it comes to job creation programs or community investment are top of that priority. But we're also thinking, as we're phasing out fossil fuels, that the workers who currently depend on that to provide for their families are also prioritized for those job programs or those training programs. And that is a really important part of all of this, creating clean, equitable communities. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ariana.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much, Jen. So now we are going to pass it on to Kate. And before Kate starts, we will be sending you an email with the link to our toolkit online. And I know some people have messaged about getting a paper copy. Please just send me an email when I send out that first one, and we'll make sure we get you connected to the fun. Awesome. Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Ariana. I did want to mention too that I did post the website for the toolkit in the chat box, so you'll have it in a couple different places if you want it. So yes, I see somebody holding it up. Somebody already has it in physical form. All right, I'm going to share my screen here quick. Let's see. Okay. Can you see that? Okay. So just to introduce myself really briefly, I am Kate Beaton. I'm the Western organizer for Wisconsin Conservation Voters. I live in Eau Claire, and I also serve on the City Council in Eau Claire and was the co-author of Eau Claire's resolution setting a goal of 100% clean energy by 2050, which passed in 2018. So Wisconsin conservation voters started to see local communities really taking the lead, local communities like Eau Claire and Madison and Green Bay taking the lead on clean energy in a time when opportunity just wasn't there at the same level at the state and federal level. And so we decided to start building campaigns in local communities to facilitate local governments and local leadership in setting these goals for 100% clean energy, to see that transition to clean energy happen on the local level when it wasn't happening necessarily on the state and federal level. One of the first communities that we built a campaign in was the city of Menominee, which is a small community just west of Eau Claire. It's considered to be part of the Chippewa Valley. The city of Menominee has a lot of, we chose the city of Menominee because it has a lot of sustainability activism already happening there. It has a university. It is a small community of about 16,000. And we launched our campaign to ask the city council to pass a resolution for 100% clean energy by 2050 back in June 2019. We started that campaign with an event. It's my feeling that sort of events, maybe in a fun place like a brewery or another public place where people enjoy being, is a great way to launch a campaign like this and find your people who are already with you. These are going to be your people who might serve on an activist campaign team and help with the direction of the campaign itself. And so we launched our campaign with an event at a local brewery in Menominee, and built from there, built a campaign team that helped us throughout the campaign. We hosted several other events like the one that you're seeing here to build up the energy and earned media. Everything we did from that first campaign event was seeking to show the city council that there was support in the community for a 100% clean energy by 2050. We took up several different types of tactics, including postcards that were personalized by the voters and sent to the city council members and mayor. We ran social media campaigns that ran within in front of city of Menominee residents. We ran mail, we collected petition signatures, we tabled at events and attended meetings of community organizational partners. Basically, we did whatever we could to get the message out to the 16,000 people in the city of Menominee that this is what we were asking of the city council, and this is how they could show their support. We asked everyone that we could to contact their city council members by phone or by email or in a one-to-one meeting. And from there, we also worked kind of with the city council and city administration to ask questions and answer questions, and help them sort of conceptualize what a commitment, what a goal setting process would look like. One of the biggest questions we got from the city council and from city administration was, you know, we set this goal, and then what's next? What sort of policies do we pass, and how do we fund the policies that we're going to pass? And so with that major question that we got over and over from Menominee and the other communities that Wisconsin conservation voters was working in, we came up with the idea to create the Wisconsin Clean Energy Toolkit. And so, you know, as we move forward into the future and more communities are being asked to pass clean energy commitments, that question is going to continue to come up, but we have a resource now to be able to achieve that. We also engaged deeply with the UW Stout campus. UW Stout is a small university, small four-year university, but we were able to plan climate strikes and kind of build off of the more international climate movement energy that already existed to ask the Menominee mayor and city council to consider our local resolution. So that was planned by our clean energy fellow who was a student. I deeply believe that students are the best people to be organizing students. And so we had about 40 students out marching with us and meeting directly with the mayor during the climate strike to ask him to make a commitment. We actually showed up in the mayor's office with our signs to ask him directly during the climate strike as well. And then after numerous tactics that I mentioned, we actually saw a resolution be passed this last Monday on April 20th. It was passed by a unanimous vote, even while you know, we had confirmed that city council members were not so supportive or maybe lukewarm on the resolution. They just got such an overwhelming flood of phone calls and emails and letters to the editor and other media that they felt compelled to pass the resolution. And so moving forward, we're going to be working with them to find their next steps. And the first thing that we did was give them the Clean Energy Toolkit. I think that's all from me. That's our story of, let's see. That's our story from Menominee. And I think that this is a really good model of how a campaign can work, kind of getting out in front of the community in a really public way with an event or something else, finding your people, your action team, and building strong relationships with the city council to help them learn the best way to use resources like the Wisconsin Clean Energy Toolkit. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. So now we are actually going to go to Casey, our other organizer in the Northeast. And Casey, if you want to actually just start by sharing some of the work you've been doing in the Northeast, and then you can get into your piece, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Casey. I'm the Northeast organizer with Wisconsin Conservation Voters based up in Green Bay. And just a quick lay of the land of what our energy landscape looks like up in this part of the state. So Green Bay is committed to 100% clean energy by 2050. The University of Wisconsin, Green Bay is committed to 100% clean energy by 2045, I believe, or is it 2040? It's earlier than 2050, I know that. St. Norbert College is committed to 100% clean energy by 2050. And just as recently as last week, Monday, if I'm remembering correctly, it's hard to remember time right now, but last week, Monday, the Green Bay Area Public School District signed on to their own clean energy resolution 100% clean energy by 2050. And so all of those were achieved in a little bit of different ways. The one that I worked on mostly was with Green Bay Area Public. We worked with admin and a few school board members and a couple members of the community to actually help them draft their resolution right alongside them in private meetings, and showed up to school board meetings to present, and then rallied activists to actually show up and share their thoughts and concerns with their school board members. So pretty similar process to what Kate had done in Menominee. And I'm just going to detail a little bit on how to develop your campaign team that's going to help you carry everything through to fruition. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to search through all of the windows and tabs that I have open. Okay, can you all see that? All right, so the first thing to note is having an actual team of people to help you out is really essential. Big changes don't happen unless there's a movement of some kind behind them. And it really does take a community to move a local government to make commitments such as this. And so when you're able to actually pull together people with different skills, strengths, networks, you're going to be able to leverage all of those and actually come out on top and be able to utilize those different skills and strengths that people have to your advantage. And, you know, we're not all superheroes. We don't all have, we can't do everything at once. And especially in these times where we're being pulled every which way because of our current environment, or just because we have, you know, even in normal times, we all have other things that we need to do. We have lives. We need to divvy up roles and responsibilities, and we need to work together to actually achieve what we want to do. And being very real, burnout is a real thing. So you simply can't handle it all by yourself. So that being said, when it comes to actually putting together a team, you kind of want to start thinking about people who are closest to you. And then as your campaign picks up more steam, you reach more people, you're kind of able to move out beyond just your immediate circle of friends and family or people that you know. So to kind of start off, you might maybe only meet up with a friend of yours who for a long time you've had a good relationship with them, you've talked about clean energy, you know, ideologically that both of you are on the same page and that you're really passionate about this subject and that you want to get going. From there, it might actually be good to put together a list of people that you both know, to think about who you can reach out to as you move out from the circle, from those who are in your immediate circle, like family and friends, to people that they might know who are maybe ideologically the same as you, who really care about clean energy or know that climate change is something that's important to them, that they want their local government to be working on. Or it might be key stakeholders in the community as well. It might be business owners or nonprofit leaders, people who really care about it in that sense. But you really do want to think about who those people are and write them down. And then as you kind of start to pick up steam and you're maybe having events like Kate had done when she first had her event in Menominee, you're able to actually start recruiting some newer people who are just getting involved and who are just first hearing about what you're doing because of an event. So if you're having events like that, if you're doing a big kickoff, you definitely want to make sure to have a sign-up sheet to have volunteers. And that being said, you should, if you're going to be doing things consistently out in the community, whether it's tabling at other people's events or holding your own events, going to things like climate strikes, if we're able to do that in the near future, making sure to get people's contact information and make that hard ask and bring them into your fold, because people really do appreciate being a part of a movement. And if you ask them and you make them feel like they have ownership and that they're welcome into your campaign, they're going to come out and help you. So that being said, this doesn't come all at once, and your very first few people who you're working with might be your friends and family, and a couple people maybe you know from like a county party, or maybe from a book club or some type of acquaintance that you know there might only be a few of you. So you kind of want to be very intentional about what types of roles and responsibilities you're doling out to people, and yourself, because again, being very real, burnout is a real thing and you can't do everything at once. You need to kind of divide and conquer. So this is just one example. I would say that this isn't necessarily a hard set model that you need to work on for your community. It really depends who is going to be, a part of your campaign team when you're first starting out, or even the size of your community. So you might have people who are in your circle who are wearing multiple hats, right? But a good way, I think, the very basic way to think about it is thinking about it in terms of event organizing. Who's going to be that person that is going to be working on a lot of the logistics, operations of putting together educational events or rallying people for strikes, if you're going to be doing that at all, or even just having happy hours for everyone to kind of gather and kind of meet each other a little bit more, get to know each other, and kind of build up momentum. Or even just getting everybody together for testimony to provide to local government when you do actually get to a point when there's a vote and you need everyone to show up and say their piece as a constituent. You probably want to have someone who's going to be focusing on communications and handling a lot of social media. If you choose to make a Facebook page or an Instagram or Twitter, somebody who can own that, who's good with social media, and can stay on top of it to consistently push out your message, who can consistently interact with people and bring new people in through social media, especially now, is really important. And then who is savvy with writing, someone who can, take up writing press releases or reaching out to the media to maybe earn some media attention. Public outreach. Yeah, I think this is one that maybe could also go into an event organizing type of role if you don't have enough people, but someone who consistently can be reaching out to new people, recruiting and them, training them, letting them in on what you're doing as far as messaging, and then even reaching out to locally elected officials and setting up lobby meetings and helping to facilitate that. And then lastly, an elected champion. You really should have someone who is going to be able to shepherd your policy and your resolution through local government and is going to go to bat for you, and who knows what the process is for whatever local government you're going to be working through, whether it's a township, a village, or a city, or if, I don't know if we have any students on here, but even if you're going to be working through your university, and you're a regular student and you're not a part of student government association, kind of figuring out who might be your student senator, or maybe it's your vice president on your SGA. And I'm going to get more into an elected champion and how to kind of find them. And then Ariana is going to talk more about lobbying later too. So we'll touch back on that. A really good tool when you do have your people and you kind of have figured out what people's strengths are, what their skills are, and how they fit into your team is MOCA. And MOCA stands for manager, owner, consulted, helper, and approver. You've probably seen tools like this called other things. I used to work for an organization called Achieve Brown County, and we had the same type of model, and it was called HARACI. To be honest, I can't remember the acronym because MOCA has just taken it over in my head. But this is a really good tool to kind of figure out when it comes to specific tasks and responsibilities, who's going to own what, who's going to oversee things, who's going to be a helper, who's consulted. So for this specific scenario, we're going to be organizing an educational event. So in some of these cases, you may have people who cross over from being a manager to an owner. In this scenario that I made up, we have the events coordinator being the manager and the owner. The owner being basically the person who's going to do a lot of the day-to-day tasks of actually setting up the event, making sure that there's a venue available, helping to develop a presentation, or maybe if you want to cater food, bring that in, or finding speakers. At the same time, that person can also be the manager because they would be the person who their actual team role is to be working on events. They're going to be the manager and the owner in this case. You might also have someone like the outreach coordinator in this made up scenario, who's going to be reaching out to new people, working with the communications person on your team to actually push out the event and reach into people's networks to bring them there. And that being said too, you can even use this model to actually break it up even more for specific tasks. If you're going to be making a presentation, you're going to have multiple people making it. You might want to have someone who's approving it, maybe the communications person, just to make sure that you're staying on message. Consulted, these are the people who pretty much just need to be like in the loop. They don't necessarily have to have the last say or decision, but you want to make sure that if you're going to be doing something out in the public, for example, and you've developed messaging that you know that your team wants to stick to, that you're going to be consulting whoever is handling that or whoever needs to do outreach or anything like that. And maybe you want to have your elected champion come and speak at your event. You definitely want to make sure that they know everything that's going on and that they're not going to be surprised when they get there. Having helpers, basically that could be anyone that you really deem responsible for that. It could be a volunteer, it could be the entire team. You could divvy it out task by task to have someone work on each specific little project underneath this larger umbrella. And then lastly, you need an approver. In some cases, this could be your entire team. You may want to take a vote on any big decisions that you're making as a team before you move forward with them. Or you might designate one single person to be the final approver and the second look and gut check before you make a final decision on anything. So this is, I'm really excited about this because I've been watching a lot of Harry Potter lately, and I was very excited to use this analogy. To me, your elected champion is a lot like Harry Potter. And if anyone has ever seen The Goblet of Fire, it's probably my favorite Harry Potter movie, but Harry is kind of the face of everything, right? He's the person that is out there and actually, and specifically for the movie Goblet of Fire, he's in the Triwizard Tournament and stuff. He's the one that's actually going through all these trials and tribulations. But at the same time, he's got his friends, Ron, Hermione, in that movie specifically, Cedric Diggory, and they're all helping him out and giving him resources, advice, and making sure that he's set up for success so that they can all be set up for success to ultimately defeat Lord Voldemort. So now that I'm done nerding out about that, I can talk a little bit more about what that means in real life. You need to be looking for someone who sincerely cares about what you're going to be doing. You want an elected official who's going to be making sure that they're following through all the steps and that they really care enough to follow through on them. Preferably, you want to have someone who has some institutional knowledge if you can find them. Someone who knows how to work the process, can work well with their colleagues to convince them if you aren't able to meet with them at all. Ideally, they shouldn't be leaving office soon, but that might not always be the case. And that way you have a little bit of longevity to actually keep working with them, and the project won't die, the campaign won't die if they're gone. And ideally, you would kind of know where they're at already. You might already know the person in local government, but if not, that's where a lobby meeting comes into play and figuring out where they are actually on your issue. So once you've basically kind of figured out who that person is, and this is something you should be thinking about too when you're writing out your list of people to reach out to for your team, you should be kind of figuring out a power map as well of what your local government looks like and figuring out all that. You want to start inviting them to meetings, bring them into the fold and letting them know what's going on so that they're on message as much as possible and educated to actually shepherd that policy through for you. And then you want to be supporting them as much as they're supporting you. And going beyond that, you want to be holding them accountable too. So making sure that you're following up with them and, you know, making sure that they're following through on their next steps and that they know that people are going to be watching and that, you know, they're going to be making sure that they are actually following through. So I am going to turn it over to Ariana because I'm kind of starting to get into her territory here. And thank you all for your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Casey. All right. So I am going to, be talking about how to effectively lobby your local electeds. And so I think there's a lot of things that overlap from what Casey says, but I think the biggest thing to me is really establishing a relationship with them. So the great thing is that we just finished with the spring election. So you have hopefully, a new cast of characters that are representing you. They might be some of them old, some of them new, at all different levels of local government. So really getting to know like who represents you now is so, so important. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is connecting with people before you need to connect with them. So establishing a relationship where they get to know you, they know your name, they know your email, and they know what you're interested in before you actually are maybe showing up their office to say, hey, this is what I need from you. That can be really, really helpful to just making sure that you get a more timely response from them, as well as makes the relationship a lot less transactional. You know, like you're really in it for the long haul, especially with clean energy work. These are, relationships and often conversations and even establishing these campaigns. These are things that, take place over months and not weeks, right? So it's so important to have relationships with people that are really going to be able to stand the test of time because often it takes some time. The other thing that I think has been super important for me the work that I'm doing in Milwaukee is really recognizing that with your electeds, you have the right to voice your opinions and offer your suggestions and interests, and that you should feel a lot of agency in going in, to your city hall or meeting with your village board and saying, hey, like this is something that I see is missing in our community, or what can we be doing to develop a clean energy plan? Because they are representing you, and even if you haven't personally elected them into office, you're their boss. That's the blessing of democracy. So I think really making sure that they know like who you are and what you care about is so, so important. Another thing is that I think especially in our current state system and also just like national climate, we often can feel like local electeds or local policy work isn't going to make the biggest impact. But what you can see obviously from what Jen was discussing as well as Kate and Casey is that local work, especially in Wisconsin, especially with climate, is not small potatoes. Like it really, really matters. And what we do at the local level is reflecting up to the state level. It's changing the way, that policy is being implemented at the state level. It's changing who we even elect to the state. So it's so important that we're having these conversations and no village is too small to have this conversation, right? No city, no county, everywhere, around the state, everyone can get involved and everywhere is important and can really help totally shift the narrative of like what Wisconsin is representing and what kind of work we're doing here. So I think local work is so, so exciting, especially in this time, and is an amazing opportunity to get involved. Another thing too is when we're thinking about establishing relationships with our local electeds, staff is so, so important. So your local electeds might not always have staff members. It really depends on the size of your community. But it is really important if they do that you are establishing a great relationship with them as well, because they're often going to be the people that are carrying messages to your elected. So a lot of times when I'm contacting my city council member in Milwaukee, I'm actually talking to their staffer. So I know that if I have a good relationship with her, then she'll hopefully get that message to my elected. as well as offering suggestions about what should be prioritized. So it's so important that they're kind of treated as equals to the electeds, because they really are the ones that are often right there behind the scenes doing a lot of that super important policy work at the local level. And then finally, I think especially at the local level, it can often, you know, seem like it can get really politicized really quickly, but that you're elected and you don't have to agree on everything, but there should always be an opportunity to collaborate. So even if your elected has done something in the past, you know, maybe it's your city council member, your mayor, what have you, county board supervisor, it's so important not to write them off. As Kate has said, you know, decisions that happen in Menominee, there was a time where maybe it wasn't going to happen unanimously, and now it did, right? So people can always have their minds changed and get on the same page. It's just about making them see that it is an opportunity to really get involved in a really important conversation and piece of work. So that's one thing to always know. But the biggest thing in terms of like kind of the tangible steps of setting up a meeting is to be really upfront about what you'd like to meet about and who is going to be there. So, you know, there's power in numbers, especially if it's your first time lobbying your local or, you know, state legislator, is to say, hey, I'm going to be here. I have my team or a couple members of my team, and we want to talk to you about a potential clean energy resolution. And so really just trusting your expertise of your own experience, and that even if you don't know everything there is to know about climate change or the financing, that you are your own expert, and living in the community, your voice has so much value. So really feeling agency in being able to set up those meetings, and always just being really specific about what you'd like to talk about, especially since people at the local level often have limited time. The other thing is to remember to always be bringing materials. So that's one of the things we're excited to offer today is our Clean Energy Toolkit, as well as policies from other governments. I know that we've been chatting in the box about other resolutions that communities have made. So that's a great opportunity to, you know, if you have a community maybe the size of Eau Claire, you can bring Eau Claire's resolution that they passed in their climate action plan. It's just an example of what other communities around the state have been doing. You can also bring financial information. I think in my experience in the Milwaukee area, that's been a really important piece to bring. Oftentimes people are like, I can get behind it, you know, ideologically, that clean energy is really important, that the climate crisis is real, but I don't know about the financial situation. So I think trying your best to be able to have some answers to those concerns as well, or be able to point them in the direction of people that could also help answer that. And then kind of the next piece of telling the story is really conveying why it's important to you personally. So why would clean energy and action on climate change, how would that impact, you know, your life and your lived experience in your community? And why is it so important that they're getting involved? Really trying to tell a story about what it would mean for your community to be another one of those blue dots on the map. And there's so many reasons, and I think oftentimes they're very personal, but I think that that also makes it really convincing to people, because you're really trying to get them to buy into reimagining your community, which is really exciting, but also really big. And then finally, the most important piece, especially in your legislative, you know, your lobbying meeting, is to have a hard ask. So this is something we talk a lot about in organizing, but not using passive language like, will you possibly do this, you know, or maybe next week, can we talk again? But just saying, you know, give them a question that's either a yes or no answer. So will you support a clean energy resolution? That is so important because it makes it really clear what you're wanting, and it leaves no room for interpretation, or at least very little room. And you're really wanting to try to just limit the possibility of them saying no. So it's either a yes or a no. But oftentimes I think people, they really want to say yes. So trying to get them to say yes. And if they are, or if they're all willing to get involved and say, yes, I'll support this, or I need more information, being able to follow up with that. So maybe they say yes, and then you can invite them to a meeting you're having with your campaign team, or you're saying, these are the next steps we're wanting to take. And if they need more information, you can also say, all right, we will send you an email and connect you with that. Because the biggest thing after you give that ask is holding them accountable to it. So if they're saying yes, you want to give them a timeline of when you're going to check in with them again. So, all right, I would love to check in with you in 2 weeks and see what the status of this is in terms of bringing it to the city council, or checking in with the city attorney about the feasibility of this kind of thing. And if they say no, there still is an opportunity, again, for you to change their minds. So a big piece of this often is having an email or call campaign, which I know all of us organizers can speak to, and getting friends, family, neighborhood, community members to call and write to that elected and say, hey, I really care about clean energy, and I'd like us to see our community pass a clean energy resolution or something like that. And that makes a big difference. And I know, you know, just last week, again, speaking to Kate's example of Menominee, they received, you know, like 10 calls, and it changed kind of the conversation. So especially at the local level, a local person, a city council member hearing from 5 constituents, that makes a really big deal, and a really big impact. So there is power in just getting, you know, your neighborhood to make some calls. And it can really make people say, oh, wow, my community actually does really care about this. So that is a huge piece of the accountability, is really making sure that they keep hearing about it, and that you're going to keep checking in, and you're not going away. So with that in mind, we will now open it up to some questions. I know that there were a couple of people that were talking, that were asking some questions in the chat box. So I'm gonna just pull that up. And then, all right, so I think the first one was talking about size of, you know, like what is the kind of the size that we can go to in terms of like, can we do something at a county level, speaking specifically about Greene County. So I don't know Jen, would you like to talk about that? Just sort of the different levels of commitments and how counties can also be committing to this kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So several counties in the state, most notably Dane County, just released their really amazing, really thorough plan. And Brown County is looking at things, Eau Claire County. I think, you know, one of the really exciting things is partnerships between different levels of government where you can get a lot of bang for buck. So as you know, in the group chat, it was pointed out, there's 7 communities in Dane County that were working together, and they actually got a grant. 7 of them got a grant together to do the initial planning phases. So I think there's no end to the level that we could be working in, and I think the key part is to be creative and to be using all the relationships that you have and having them work together.
And I think
Awesome,
if I could
thanks.
add, I think that that's when these resolutions are strongest, because we don't have to be investing in multiple different ways to achieve one of the same goals, right? So we can invest our dollars more efficiently when we're working across governments. In Eau Claire, the county, city, school board, and university have all committed to 100% clean energy. And the city of Eau Claire created a plan to achieve our clean energy benchmarks by 2030 with that in mind. So with all of those kind of governmental sectors working together to create that plan. So.
Great, thank you. And then there was another question, I think Casey and Kate, you both could probably answer this pretty well, about universities, and what university commitments can look like when it comes to clean energy.
Yeah, so for both Green Bay and St. Norbert's, they came to their commitments through their Student Governments Association. So it actually was pretty much a similar process to a lot of what we've already talked about with city councils. At least with the SGA portion of it, they still have committees that they will basically write the resolution in and they'll vote on as a full SGA, and then will get implemented into university policy. It could also be different. You could also come through with administrative decisions to do that, but I think it's a little bit more cumbersome because Kate mentioned it before. Students are really pumped up about clean energy. They want to be doing this stuff already. And I think the ground is a lot more fertile to work through student government associations, but it kind of depends too on whether or not it's a public university or a private university too. I know that NWTC, as an example, has and I'm not like too well versed into what their institutional makeup looks like, but they have a student senate. I don't know if it quite has this, like the same amount of power as, for example, like a four-year university's student government association has. But if there's anything that Kate would want to add to that, I'll pass it off to her too.
Yeah, I just emphasize what I said before in that I think the best people to be doing this is students. And so I think that if you're interested in looking into your local university passing a goal, I think your first step would be to find a student leader who can really lead the charge.
One thing I would add too is depending on the university, seg fees might be one thing to look at as well, on how a SUFAC, the organization or board that looks over those segregated fees, or a student government association could have set up things like a green fund. St. Norbert College has a green fund that basically every student that they pay for a little bit in their seg fees, and they've been able to use that for clean energy projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey and Kate. So then another question is, how can we coordinate with or find out about what other groups are doing? So, you know, at the local level, there seem to be a number of nonprofits, other groups that are working on similar initiatives. So how do you kind of connect to those resources as well, and people that are doing similar work? Any thoughts, Casey or Kate?
I would say it goes back to the relationships that you have in the community and with other people working on the things that you also care about. The best way to figure that out is to stay really connected with the people on the ground. That's the only way I'm able to stay connected with what else is happening. There's really no like list of the current campaigns that are running currently, unfortunately, just relationship based.
Yeah, and I know in my experience, I started this job with Conservation Voters in August, but I think there's just so much power in just like showing up to different meetings. So, you know, searching in your community and seeing what other environmental organizations or kind of community organizing groups are there, and just got to show up. And I think you just build so many relationships that way. So in Milwaukee, I'm involved with the Milwaukee Equity and Climate Alliance with Conservation Voters. And then also I'm on two of the work groups with the task force that Jen had mentioned on climate and economic equity. And I didn't really know anything about them before I showed up. And then I just showed up to some meetings and kept showing up. And so they had to keep me. But I do think that it's so important to just show up and start asking questions and letting people know, hey, I'm interested in having this conversation and doing this kind of work. Because there are, like this person mentioned, there are so many groups that are doing similar things, especially environmentally related. And so I think that this can be a really exciting campaign to work on as a community because it is so tangible. and there often is a clear timeline of events, which can be really satisfying, I think, for people to work on, especially if they're working on it from multiple different groups, because oftentimes, it can seem like, oh my gosh, when's this goal going to be over? And for a lot of times it's like, oh, when are we going to solve climate change, right? We don't know. We don't have a timeline for that, but we can have a timeline, at least a more tangible one, for committing our community to clean energy, which can be really exciting and make people feel pretty fulfilled. Yeah. Any other questions before we go into our last piece? Yeah, so, well, I will say this one thing and then we can go to our last question from Kate. But our ask for you all is to take the Clean Energy Toolkit and send it to your city council member, your county board supervisor, your mayor, really get in the hands of local electeds. So I'll be sending an email after this with the link to that toolkit and some language for an email. But we would really love if you're able to do that, put it in the hands of local electeds. And if you feel comfortable doing that, also see if there is a way that you can set up a phone call with someone this week and talk to them about what you've learned from this in your community, and if they'd be interested in doing something with you. The great thing about things like Zoom or Google Hangouts is that it is really easy to connect with people still, even when we're in our homes. So those are our asks, is trying to start connecting and figuring out, can you build a campaign team in your local community? And also, can you take this toolkit and put it in the hands of local electeds, just so they have that information and we can keep connecting with them about further resources. So with that in mind, is there anyone, hopefully there are, I know there are some people because I've worked with them on clean energy campaigns, but is anyone thinking about starting a campaign or is interested in starting a campaign? If you are, you're welcome to unmute yourself and talk a little bit about it.
This is Barb Woodruff from Greene County. And I think our county has the perfect name to start out such a movement. And I'm one of those people who thinks it should be, I was looking at starting a county-wide, a Greene County, greening of Greene County. And so I have spoken to one of our county board members already who said she'd be interested in helping. And I've spoken to a couple other influential people in the community who said that they're interested in helping with this also. So yes, I would also like, if I can, to get a paper copy of the toolkit besides having it on email. Is that okay? Do I need to send you my email address or somehow do that now?
Yeah, we can connect offline, Barb, about that.
Okay.
And yeah, anyone else, I'll again be sending you all an email. So feel free to just respond to me if you need a paper copy, and we'll figure out how to do that.
Anna.
Yeah. Anyone else that is, oh, go ahead, Kate.
I just was going to say, I believe Sue Nelson is on this call, who just got elected as the Greene County Board. And so if you two haven't connected, you should.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm here, and yeah,
Hi, Sue.
I know each other, so all is good.
Awesome. Anyone else that is interested, thinking about, or maybe already in the process of working with their community on a clean energy resolution that wants to share?
This is Kathy from La Crosse. Our city council passed a resolution last July, so now we kind of have to get on them about how are they going to make that happen. It kind of got stuck at our county board, but now we have some new people there, so we're going to redouble efforts to push for it at our county board. And we're trying to start an initiative with our local school district, because I don't know yet how you pronounce it, but there's this foundation that is trying to get solar on Wisconsin schools, COUILLARD. Plus, our community is going to be starting a solar group buy program. So we're going to start trying to get our school district on board.
Awesome. Thank you. Chuck, yes, I saw you were unmuting yourself.
Hi, I'm Chuck Rohr in Wauwatosa, and we have a citizen committee called Sustainability Committee. And for years, we've been thinking and talking about this. And I have to give a huge thank you to Ariana for showing up at every one of our last 6 or 7 meetings and pushing this idea. And our citizen committee has passed a resolution that we're now forwarding to the Common Council. My hope was before this pandemic hit that it would be a done deal now, but so we're kind of in a treading water mode until we can get out of our houses again. But we're starting to lobby, Common Council members and our new mayor, and I think we have a really good shot at getting that resolution passed. So thank you, Ariana.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, and I think that as Chuck mentioned, I think one of the great things about Wauwatosa and a lot of other communities is when there's already a committee that is connected to sustainability or the environment, because as people have mentioned, even, once you pass a resolution, you still need to continue to keep having that conversation. Otherwise, a lot of times resolutions can kind of just sit around and not necessarily do anything. You have to have people that are working on making those resolutions and then those ideas into a reality. And so I think having a sustainability committee, having a task force can be really, really helpful in making sure that that conversation gets continued. And that people really are held accountable to taking action steps, right, once the resolution actually passes. So yeah, I'm super excited about Wauwatosa. Awesome. And then Lee, did you want to share?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to also give Terry Dawson, who's also on the call, an opportunity to talk. So as you know, Appleton has a new mayor, a progressive mayor who's committed to climate action, and we have a progressive majority on our city council. So for us, it's a really great opportunity to sort of move forward a committee that was established under the last mayor and to, turn some of those, as you said, aspirational ideas into actual accountable action. So I don't know, Terry, do you want to go on a little bit about where you guys stand on the climate committee through the city?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. You said a lot of what I wanted to say, but I think we are in a good position because we have this resolution that was adopted last November, and the committee didn't start meeting until February, and of course we had to stop meeting in March. But as of this week, we've started meeting in informal subcommittees to start looking at issues like energy and waste and transportation and infrastructure and some other things. So I'm really excited about the fact that we're at least going with some conversations. We're looking for ways to involve more community people in those conversations. And we're going to be making recommendations back to the city council. So it's moving, and this has been very useful to understand some of the ways that we can move forward. And I'll probably be talking to Casey and Seth a little bit more about some of the things that are happening up in Green Bay.
Great.
Awesome. And then Renee, I heard Renee is on the call from De Pere, and I was hoping that you would be able to share some things about the work that you're doing on the Sustainability Commission there.
Oh, hi, yes. So we started up about 1.5 years ago, and we've just completed a baseline for our community through the Green Tier program. And so now we've kind of assessed where we are at and where we need to improve. And now our next steps is to find the funding and determine the best projects that are right for our community. And we've sent out the toolkit to everyone on the committee, so they should be reviewing it now. And we're hoping to actually have Casey come in and just be available to answer questions at our next meeting, so people can really make the best use out of the toolkit.
Great.
Awesome, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to share anything? Feel free to unmute yourself if you do.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say that Middleton was able to get its resolution passed back in 2018, And that came on the heels of the 2016 climate resolution. And so basically, the history there relied a lot on the fact that the Sustainability Committee had been in existence for a while and was starting to look at ways to take things to the next step. And they came up with this idea for a referendum, which ended up getting me roped in to work as a coordinator on that project. And things went really well. The dominoes were already lined up. It really wasn't as long as people stayed awake to the end of the ballot, we were pretty sure would get a good win, because Middleton is fairly woke to the issue, shall we say. The side of it, though, that's still important is maintaining some level of community engagement after the milestone, to make sure the next milestone is hit. And Sherry Gruder has a story about how she was following up on the status of, I think it was 25 by 25 was the project or program she'd been involved with. And many communities were telling her, we never passed that resolution. And she was holding the resolution in her hand while she was calling to talk to them. So there's really an important role to play, to not just relax and say, hey, we got the votes, we passed the resolution, now we can go home. It's like, you still need to be there to make sure that people don't forget about it.
Mhm.
And it's sad but true. But the flip side is that you may find, if you look back through the archives, that the city already has done something. The municipality has already taken a step. Maybe they've signed this resolution that they forgot about, and you can use that as a springboard and a starting point for discussion. Say, hey, wait a second, you guys. You already decided this is worth looking at. You already decided we should take action. And so anyway, so don't presume you're starting from scratch. Check the archives, check the history, and you may find you have more of a foundation to build on than you appreciate.
Yeah, thank you. And Joseph, do you want to go? Maybe you'll be our last one, and then we'll
Okay.
wrap up.
Yeah, just going to say the City of Wisconsin Rapids has a sustainability committee. I've been working with the mayor for about the last 8 years. However, as of Tuesday, we have a new mayor, and I haven't met him yet, but I heard that it's going to be more of a challenge working with a new mayor. He may not have the same outlook as our previous mayor. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to maintain our efforts or not.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you everyone for being on this call and joining us. We're so happy to have you. And the last thing we'd like to just push is that we are definitely here as resources for these conversations and for this work and helping develop these campaigns. So please reach out. You all will have my email, and I'm happy to connect you with anyone that would be helpful for this conversation. But I know that also there's been a couple of things in the chat about, what do we do after and how can we continue to build this community around clean energy. So please, if you have other ideas about what you'd like to see, us doing in terms of another Zoom event or webinar, I would love to hear those suggestions. We definitely have the ability to do that, and we'd love to hear what y'all need in terms of making sure this work can happen at the local level. And yes, just thank you so much. We'll be sending you an email with the clean energy resolution, and would love if you can send it along to your representatives at the local level. So thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you all are staying well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
And happy Earth Week.
Yes. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Eh?